True cultural vigilance requires not simply guarding against known threats, but maintaining a critical awareness of how our ways of thinking, communicating, and understanding ourselves are being transformed by forces we might not even recognize as threats. Greetings and welcome back to Gadfly Academy, home of You Are Not a Machine. I haven't discussed why I've started calling this new undertaking Gadfly Academy, but now that we're embarking on our first book study, it seems like a natural place to do so. So there are many reasons I decided to use this new name, but for now I'll just mention where the name comes from. The great philosopher Socrates referred to himself as a gadfly, by which he meant that he could be a persistent and sometimes irritating voice of reason. Through his arguments, he urged his fellow citizens to examine their core assumptions and beliefs. Similarly, our own Gadfly Academy provides a place where we can question many of our culture's core beliefs, and Neil Postman's Amusing Ourselves to Death is a key modern text in this ancient tradition. Speaking of which, today we will be looking at the foreword of Postman's book. I've decided to focus online discussion of the text on my Substack page, but feel free to join the conversation wherever you would like. Most of us will probably be on Substack, but I will definitely be checking all the other major social platforms, and I'll be cross-posting as much as I can. If you're on X, please join the Gadfly Academy community page. So that's it for housekeeping. So without further ado, let's look at the foreword to Neil Postman's Amusing Ourselves to Death. In today's installment, we're finally getting into the meat of Postman's classic work. So the idea for Postman's book was born in Germany, where he was presenting at a conference celebrating the arrival of the year 1984, and in particular reflecting on the cultural relevance of George Orwell's famous novel called 1984. Postman opens his book by comparing the two most influential English dystopian novels of the 20th century, Orwell's 1984 and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. Postman's thesis, as he writes at the end of the foreword to his book, was that, quote, "This book is about the possibility that Huxley, not Orwell, was right." In 1984, Americans celebrated what they regarded as a triumph of liberal democracy. George Orwell's dystopian vision hadn't materialized, no telescreens monitored their every move, no thought police patrolled their minds, no Big Brother demanded their unwavering devotion. The intellectual class in particular took pride in this apparent victory over authoritarian control. But in this moment of self-congratulation lay a profound irony that Postman captures in his foreword to Amusing Ourselves to Death. Postman's opening passage subtly exposes American cultural blindness, and I'll discuss what lies at the heart of this cultural blindness a little bit later. When he writes that, quote, "thoughtful Americans sang softly in praise of themselves," the sarcasm is palpable. These weren't the uninformed masses, but the intellectual elite, the very people tasked with cultural criticism and societal vigilance. They were guilty of what military strategists refer to as fighting the last war. That is, preparing for threats based on past experiences while remaining oblivious to new, and in this case, already present dangers. This misplaced vigilance was compounded by a distinctly American strain of exceptionalism. The phrase, "wherever else the terror had happened," suggests a deeply ingrained belief that authoritarian nightmares were something that happened to other countries, never to America itself. This comfortable assumption allowed Americans to maintain their sense of moral and political superiority while missing the transformation that was happening right under their feet. The true power of Postman's critique lies in its recognition that cultural decay rarely announces itself with jackboots and propaganda posters. While Americans were scanning the horizon for Orwellian threats and navigating the Red Scare, they missed the subtle erosion of public discourse through entertainment media the replacement of reasoned debate with spectacle, and the gradual surrender of critical thinking to the allure of endless amusement. What makes this passage particularly resonant is its enduring relevance. Today, we still find ourselves vigilant against obvious threats, while potentially blind to more subtle dangers. We worry, for example, about explicit censorship, while algorithms quietly shape our information diet. We fear government surveillance, while voluntarily surrendering our privacy to social media platforms. We guard against political propaganda, while entertainment and advertising reshape our very modes of thinking. Postman's opening serves as more than a mere critique of 1984's America. It's a warning about the nature of cultural blind spots themselves. The greatest threats to a society's well-being may not be the ones it's actively watching for, but rather the ones that slip in through the back door of progress, of comfort, and of entertainment. The passage reminds us that cultural vigilance requires not simply watching for obvious dangers, but maintaining a critical awareness of how our society's fundamental modes of thinking and communication are being transformed. It should also remind us that in order to measure something, one needs to have a device for measuring. One of the reasons that we find ourselves in the predicament that we find ourselves in is that our society does not have very many criteria by which to judge the goodness of, for example, a mode of entertainment, say television, to take Postman's example. I have referred to the Amish before, and I will likely refer to them many times again, because the Amish do have criteria by which they judge and accept or reject all technologies that they encounter. A large part of our cultural blindness is that we largely lack such criteria. In an age of digital media, viral content, and artificial intelligence, this warning becomes even more pertinent. While we celebrate our technological progress and apparent freedom from traditional forms of control, we must ask ourselves, what are today's blind spots? What transformations are we missing while we congratulate ourselves on avoiding the obvious threats of the past? This is the timeless relevance of Postman's opening, not simply as a critique of a particular historical moment, but as a template for understanding how societies can miss the very things that are fundamentally reshaping them. It stands as a reminder that true cultural vigilance requires not simply guarding against known threats, but maintaining a critical awareness of how our ways of thinking, communicating, and understanding ourselves are being transformed by forces we might not even recognize as threats. One of my great aspirations with Gadfly Academy and You Are Not a Machine is that by going deeper into the great cultural critics of the past 100 years, we will increasingly develop this critical awareness, as well as criteria by which we can judge new technologies.